Hello everyone. Welcome to welcome to the top 10 topics of the day for October 22nd, 2021. So without wasting much time, let's look at the top 10 topics of the day. The first being the need for strategic reserves for coal and gas. Now, we have been seeing that India is facing a shortage of coal, and there has been a lot of demand and supply gap, especially with related to the power sector. So, there has been a recommendation for strategic reserves for coal and gas on the line of petroleum reserves. So, India is considering to maintain the strategic reserves of coal and natural gas to meet the future shortages. A surge in power demand and fallen imports, also rise in supply disruptions, have led to supply side constraints. India is the fourth largest coal reserves in the world, and also it is the second largest importer of coal. 70% of the country's electricity generation is dependent on the coal. So, the major countries from which India imports coal are Indonesia, Australia, and South Africa. Now, India imported 21 million tons of coal every month before the pandemic period. And let me tell you that the electricity sector itself accounts for 6 million ton demand. Related to the strategic petroleum reserves program, which I just mentioned earlier, the government had set up 3 strategic petroleum reserves in Visakhapatnam, Mangaluru, and Paduru. So there is a special purpose vehicle which is called as the Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserves Limited that has set up petroleum storage facilities with a total capacity of 5.33 million tons to meet the petroleum demands during periods of shortages. So the second most important topic is United Nations has now unveiled a fund for people's economy in Afghanistan. So at the global conference, Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, announced 20 million US dollars allocation from the United Nations Central Emergency Response Fund to support the humanitarian operation in Afghanistan. Various countries were calling donors and aid for the country as winter is setting in and the country is facing a devastating situation after the Taliban has taken over. There is also a humanitarian catastrophe in the form of migration and also human rights violation there in the country, especially women and girls. Now, the United Nations has convened a high-level ministerial event on humanitarian situation in Afghanistan to highlight the acute needs in the country and the need for urgent funding support. The UN chief said that in order to continue the life-saving efforts in Afghanistan, 4 things are needed right away. And what are they? They are funding, boosting humanitarian access, need to safeguard the rights of women and girls in Afghanistan, and need to ensure humanitarian response saves lives but also saves livelihoods. The third most important topic for today is that the US and the EU nations have reached a deal to drop the digital service tax. Now, the digital service tax was also in the news in June when US had imposed tariffs in retaliation of the digital service tax. India was one of the countries was facing the brunt of this after the United Nations Trade Representative report identified this, and the US said that it is going to impose tariffs equivalent to the digital service tax that has been imposed by India on the US companies. Let us look at the details. The United Nations has reached an agreement with Austria, France, Italy, Spain, and Britain that it will terminate the threat of American tariffs on certain goods from these countries in exchange for removal of the digital service taxes that they had imposed on the US companies such as Facebook, Amazon, and Google. So the agreement comes as more than 130 countries recently had agreed to overhaul the international taxation system and to adopt a global minimum tax of 15% and also bring changes with respect to tax rights so that the large multinational corporations are taxed based on where the goods and services are sold rather than where they operate. So, the global tax dispute between US and the EU nations, which in recent years imposed digital service tax on American companies, targeted mainly the American technology giants. The agreement amounts to concessions that the US will give, which wanted the digital service tax to be removed immediately. Now, the Trump administration initially imposed tariffs on France in 2020 in retaliation for the digital service tax. Biden, when he came after the presidential election, also wanted to do the same. But then tax discussions took place between the US and the EU countries, and the plan was dropped. Now, India, the USTR proposed a course of action which includes additional tariffs up to 25% to match the digital service tax which India was had imposed on the US companies. E-commerce operators are obligated to pay the tax at the end of each quarter. So, according to the USTR, that is the United States Trade Representative valuation, the Indian taxation will cost the US 55 million per year. So, what is the digital service tax? It is a levy on the revenues generated from digital services, including digital platform services, digital content services, and digital data related services. India is one of the first countries which has imposed this equalization levy in 2016, which was first restricted only to online advertisement services, commonly known as digital advertising taxes or DATs. Then in 2020, the scope was broadened to extend to all kinds of digital transactions. The fourth most important topic of the day is that the government has failed to measure the scale of hunger to tailor its responses. Now, this has been said by certain analysts or has criticized the government for its argument against the Global Hunger Index data, which has recently reduced India's ranking to 101 out of 116 countries, and India has been ranked worse than Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Government questioned the method used by this global hunger index and said that it is baseless. The findings are baseless. Government of India also criticized the global hunger index report, which said that the pandemic did not have an effect of hunger on the neighboring countries, but it did have an effect on India. Now, the Global Hunger Index is published by Concern Worldwide, which is an Irish aid agency, and Welt Hunger Hilfe, a German non-profit organization. The Global Hunger Index score is calculated on 4 indicators: undernourishment, that is number 1. Number 2 is child wasting. Wasting means those who have low weight for their height. Child stunting, 3, that is those who have low height for their age. And 4 is child mortality rate of children under the age of 5. So it is startling to look at the findings of the National Family Health Survey data, which released in December last year, showed that several states recorded significant fall in indicators that represent the nutritional status of children in 2019-20 compared to what it was in 15 and 16. It says that 14 out of 17 states are seeing increase in severe wasting. 11 out of 17 states are seeing an increase in child stunting. 10 out of 17 states saw an increase in child wasting. Now, tackling hunger is one of the first important goals of the Sustainable Development Goals of United Nations. The government, on its other hand, it said that has taken various steps to tackle hunger and malnutrition. Some of the steps specified by the government are: it has allocated food grains of 5 kg per month free of cost to around 80 crore people during the pandemic. A similar scheme for migrant workers was brought about. Cash transfer of rupees 500 for 20 crore women account holders by the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. 1,000 per month from April to June to 3 crore aged widows and differently able people. However, the National Family Health Survey shows us some startling data which I have read just now. There are negative effects of this high level of hunger or undernutrition which affects the population, especially children, women, and also the teenagers. There is negative consequences, and if not arrested, it can have its impact not only on the development of the cities of the population, but also demographic characteristics and also the health, education and economic performance. So in India, both adult population and children are at risk. For instance, the BMI of a quarter of a teenage and middle aged woman is below the global standard norm, and more than half of the women suffer from anemia. Government is already running a program of Anemia Mukt Bharat. Now, the quarter of our teenage and middle aged men show signs of iron and calcium deficiency, and this has been given as per the latest National Family Health Survey data. Union budget discussed Poshan Abhiyan, which is Prime Minister's overarching scheme for holistic nourishment with increased allocation, and now it has launched Poshan 2.0. However, it is seen that the allocation towards the child nutrition has dropped. Now, this Poshan Abhiyan was launched in 2017 and it improves nutrition among the children, pregnant women, lactating mothers. However, the scheme has been suffering due to poor funding and also clubbing with other schemes. Only 0.57% of the current budget has been allocated towards the actual funding of Poshan scheme, and the amount of child nutrition has been dropping by a whopping 18.5% compared to 2020 and 21. This is a call for the government to take actions immediately, especially to arrest hunger, malnutrition, and undernutrition among the children. The fifth most important news is that Pakistan retained the FATF's grey list again. So, this decision was taken by the FATF in the recent plenary session in October 2021. So, the FATF, global money laundering body and the terrorist financing watchdog, is a terrorist financing and global money laundering prevention watchdog. The body, during its plenary session, has retained Pakistan on the grey list. Now, the country has been on the grey list since 2018. When it is on the grey list, it is difficult for the country to access financing from international organizations. The country has been placed in the list first in 2008 and then in 2009 it was removed. Again, it has been included in 2012 and it stayed so till 2015. The FATF observed that Pakistan had completed 26 out of the 27 action items that it had to do in the 2018 plan. The one remaining item was about continuing to demonstrate that terrorist financing investigations and prosecutions targeted senior leaders and commanders of United Nations designated terrorist groups. So, what are the steps Pakistan should take if it needs to come out of the grey list? The FATF has addressed this. It says that providing evidence that it is actively seeking to enhance impact of sanction beyond the jurisdiction by nominating additional individuals and entities for designation at the UN, demonstrating an increase in money laundering investigations and prosecutions. So, the decision on Pakistan's status now will be taken next in the plenary session, which will be held between February to March in 2022. The sixth most important news is that NGOs cannot get unbridled foreign funds. Now, this the government has said in response to the petition which has been filed in the Supreme Court challenging the amendments that have been brought through the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. The Supreme Court was hearing a petition that challenged the amendments. Now, in the affidavit, the government spelled out its aims and motives of bringing the changes to the FCRA. The amendments were necessary, the government says, to prevent malpractices and diversions. Foreign powers are non-state actors who act with ulterior motives. Interference in political and social discourse of the country by some foreign states by some NGOs. The centre said that there is no fundamental right to receive unbridled foreign contribution. So let us see what are the challenges, what are the sections or the amendments that are being challenged by the NGOs. The challenge is mainly to the following provisions. Section 7 says that the government can forbid the recipient of foreign contribution to transfer the same to some other country. Now, the government has taken this step because it found many NGOs were diverting the funds to some other entities. Section 8 says that the limits to use the foreign contribution for administration from 50% currently to 20%. Section 11 says that the government can suspend the usage of foreign contribution by an NGO if an inquiry is pending on suspected violations. Section 12 and 17 says that the state that contributions must be deposited by the NGO or the company or individual receiving such foreign contributions in a branch of a scheduled bank, which was later notified by the Union government as the SBI branch of Delhi. Section 12A says that it allows the center to obtain an Aadhaar number of key functionaries of organization for approval. Center said that amendments will bring in transparency and accountability on the NGOs. And it is said that this is done to protect the sovereignty, integrity, and national security of the government. The FCRA Act regulates acceptance and utilization of foreign contribution or foreign hospitality by individuals, association, companies, and also prohibits the usage of the same that is detrimental to national interest. The seventh most important topic of the day is that gene editing guidelines have been facing a delay. And this has come into picture after the EU has leveled allegations of genetic modification contamination of rice in the EU. Now, the Indian Agriculture Research Institute has been waiting for approval from the Genetic Engineering Approval Committee to use certain gene editing tools to tweak the plant's genetic composition, which would allow the plants to be modified without the need for using conventional transgenic technology where a foreign gene is introduced. So, unlike the older GM technology, which involves introducing a foreign DNA, the new proposal involves using tools to directly tweak the plant's own genes instead. Now, the scientists of the Indian Agriculture Research Institute are in the process of developing resilient and high yield rice varieties using such gene editing techniques. But this process has been stopped because of the delay of the Genetic Engineering Approval Committee, which looks into matters such as these. And they hope that if the approval is given fast, such rice varieties can be in the hands of Indian farmers by 2024. They also call this the new green revolution. Now, the IARI has previously worked on golden rice, which is a traditional GM variety which has inserted genes from other organisms into the rice plant. But the trials ended over 5 years ago because of agronomic issues and criticisms. India has not approved any GM food crop for commercial cultivation until now, except for GM cotton. The institute has now moved to newer technologies such as the site directed nuclease 1 and 2. So through genome editing or gene editing, the scientists can remove certain undesirable traits and also introduce desired traits in a plant by tweaking the gene that is already there in the plant without bringing any gene from outside. And this can be done by using the technology called as site-directed nuclease. So the IARI is using these techniques to develop the right rice varieties which are drought tolerant, salinity tolerant, and high yielding. Nucleus mediated genome editing techniques include the zinc finger nuclease, TAL effector nuclease, CRISPR or Cas9, for which recently scientists have won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2020, and meganuclease. I've just given you a list of the plant modification techniques which are being used as of recent. So, cutting and modifying the genome during the repair process, genome editing to introduce changes to just few base pairs, called as the oligonucleotide directed mutagenesis, transferring a gene from an identical or closely related species, such as cisgenesis, adding a reshuffled set of regulatory instructions from same species, that is intragenesis, and deploying processes that alter the gene activity without altering the DNA itself, that is epigenetic methods. And lastly, grafting of unaltered plant into genetically modified rootstock. Many scientists have called for using of biotechnology or genetic engineering or gene editing to develop salinity, drought resistant, and especially heat resistant plants in the backdrop of climate change related events and decrease in the yields of plant, and also plants becoming more immune to the fertilizers and the pesticides. So the next eighth, the most important topic is Prime Minister to attend the climate change summit at Glasgow, that is a COP26. Let us see what the focus of the summit is going to be and what the countries have been discussing. So India is to attend the climate change summit at Glasgow. Now the expectations are there for steeper cut in the greenhouse gas emissions. All eyes are on India, as United States has recently called India to spell out its net zero emissions target. India is the third largest emitter, followed by China and USA. There have been demands from various countries that India and other countries should increase their commitments in the nationally determined contributions, which is the focus and the heart of the Paris Agreement. Now, the nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement are efforts by each country to reduce the national emissions. The Paris Agreement requires each party or country to prepare, communicate nationally determined contributions that they intend to achieve voluntarily. This is said in Article 4 of the Paris Agreement. So, what does actually net zero mean? Net zero means balancing out the greenhouse gas emissions with actions such as planting trees, restoring soil, using technology to prevent emissions reaching the atmosphere. Canada is the first country to reach the net zero emissions by 2050 to fight climate change. It has also brought out an act called as the Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act, which has become a law already in June. At the COP26 Climate Summit, hitting net zero globally by 2050 is a key goal. In the further slides, we will be discussing more on this. I've given you a map which I will be explaining a few minutes later. Now, what is UN defined as the net zero emissions, because the Paris Climate Change Agreement does not have any terms such as net zero. It says that net zero emissions as close to zero as possible. It means we no longer add heat trapping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Some greenhouse gases might still be emitted through natural process, but they would be balanced off or cancelled by removal of an equivalent amount of greenhouse gases, this is very similar to carbon neutrality. So the focus of the COP26 is to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. In the map beside, I've shown you that just two countries in the world now have achieved carbon neutrality. One is Suriname in the South America and one is Bhutan. The grey areas which I've circled are the countries which are bringing net zero emissions by law. One is Canada. We can see the Baltic countries like France, Sweden, Poland, UK, etc. Bhutan. In the Asia, we can see Japan, South Korea, and in Oceania, we can see New Zealand. So these countries are in the process of bringing a law to bring about net zero emissions by 2050. So why is it actually so important to reach a net zero? Climate scientists say that this is the only way to stop climate change. As long as greenhouse gases keep adding to the atmosphere, the average global temperature will also keep rising. So then why is 2050 set to be the deadline? It says, the scientists say that this is required to keep the warming below 1.5 degrees centigrade. The IPCC has modeled different scenarios for reaching the Paris targets, and in all simplest paths to 1.56 degrees centigrade, it is required the world to cut emissions to 45% below 2010 levels, and this should be done by 2030, that is in the next 8 years, and then reaching a net zero by 2050. So the climate scientists say that if we do not hit net zero by 2050, we will lose the window of opportunity to stay below the 1.5 degrees centigrade increase by the end of century, meaning that the temperature will increase. Modeling of IPCC says that the impacts will range from drought, sea level rise, there will be species that get extinct if the temperatures increase more than 2 degrees centigrade. In this diagram, I've shown you a comparison of what the impact will be if the temperature rises to 2 degrees centigrade and if we do not reach the 1.5 degrees centigrade. So there will be an increase in heat related events to 37% from the present from the 14%. Vertebrates will lose their range to 8% from 4%. Plants will lose their range to 16%, that is 2 times more than 8%. Insects will lose their range to 18% from 6%. There will be reduction in maize. Similarly, the amount of Earth's land area where the ecosystems will shift to new biomes will also increase. The Arctic permafrost that will thaw will increase. There will be number of ice-free summers in Arctic. Also, the amount of sea level rise will increase to 50 centimeters if the temperature increases to 2 degrees centigrade. There will be decline in the coral reefs and also decline in marine fisheries. So this shows us the impact of if the actions are not taken to decrease the greenhouse gas emissions and not achieving net zero emissions target by 2050, and what will happen if the temperature of the earth increases to 2 degrees centigrade. Now, the ninth most important topic says that the Supreme Court says farmers have the right to protest, but they cannot block roads. So this present article, I've explained to you how the Supreme Court has balanced out the farmers' right to protest along with respecting the commuters' right of commuting without any hindrance. So the Supreme Court has said that the public roads cannot be blocked to hamper free movement. The farmers are protesting the agriculture laws. The farmers said that they should be allowed to enter the Ram Leela Maidan Jantar Mantar to continue the protest against the agriculture laws. The Supreme Court in turn said that it had laid down a law in the Shaheen Bagh protest saying that the right to protest cannot hamper the right to movement of public. The Supreme Court said that it is not against the right to protest, but the protest cannot block roads. Thereby, the protesters or the farmers have to respect the rights of the commuters. Blocking of the roads would impede the right to commute without hindrance. On October 4th, a two-judge bench of the court, while hearing a plea of the farmers, said that it would examine whether someone who has already approached the court seeking remedy has absolute right to protest on the streets on the same issue while the challenge is still pending. Meaning that whether the farmers have a right to protest when the matter is sub judice. Let us see what the Supreme Court said. Supreme Court said that pendency before the court or sub judice matters are not constitutionally permissible grounds on which restrictions can be imposed on a right to protest. Now, right to protest. So then on what grounds can the right to protest can be restricted? Now right to protest is explicitly mentioned in the Article 19. The base of this is formed by the Article 19(1)(a), which is freedom of speech and expression, and Article 1b, 19(1)(b), that is freedom of assembling peacefully. Article 1c, 19(1)(c) says that all citizens have the right to form associations and union. These three combined defend the right to protest. It is to be understood that these rights are not absolute in nature, that is, the authorities or the government can impose restrictions on the above mentioned rights. And the restrictions are mentioned in the same Article 19, Clause 2 and 3, which can be done on the ground of sovereignty, integrity of India, and public order. So, the Supreme Court in 2020 has already endorsed the position that the pendency of a constitutional challenge before the court cannot deprive anybody of the right to protest. Right to protest in the recent judgment of Amit Sahani versus the Commissioner of Police, famously called as the Citizenship Act Amendment protest, the court said that public ways and spaces cannot be occupied in a manner that is indefinitely. In the Ram Leela Maidan versus Home Secretary Union of India, the court said that citizens have a fundamental right to assemble and peaceful protest, which cannot be taken away by arbitrary or executive legislative action. Our judiciary has from time to time directed the meaning of right to protest by providing landmark judgments. In all cases, the court has tried to balance out the right to hold public demonstration and also the right to commute, especially in cases such as the Citizenship Amendment Act, the Jantar Mantar protest, and many other cases. So, protests are basically demands made by a group of individuals in the form of public demonstrations. Now, Article 19 upheld this right to raise a demand, but the condition is that the protest must be peaceful. So, one has the right to protest while exercising this right. They cannot, however, cause any inconvenience to others. And also, the authorities are provided the power to impose restrictions on them, provided these restrictions should be reasonable in nature. So, citizens have the right to protest on one hand, and the authorities have the right or the power to impose limitations, provided these limitations are reasonable. Also, it should be remembered that the right to protest is not absolute. The 10th most important topic of the day is India achieves the 100 crore vaccination mark. Now, this itself is an achievement for the government because no other country in the world has vaccinated such a huge number of population in such less time. Also, it should be remembered that India is one of the very few countries that has a vaccination of its own. There are many countries in the world that still do not have their own vaccination and are dependent on supplies from other countries. We have seen this when the government was implementing the mission vaccination program during the pandemic, where it had provided assistance in the form of vaccinations free of cost to many neighboring countries. Let us see what does the 100 crore vaccination mark actually mean. Now, the people that have been given at least one dose stand at 71.1 crore. The total adult population is 93.89 crore, meaning only 2/3 of the adult population have received only one dose. So, this population has to receive the second dose also. Only 29.5 crore individuals, that is the adults, have been fully vaccinated with 2 doses. It means that only 1/4 of the total adult population has been vaccinated. There is a still more longer way to go. Also, only 17% of those vaccinated above 60 plus age, meaning almost 83% of the people are still left to be vaccinated. 56% of those vaccinated belong to 18 to 44. Again, another half is remaining. 27 of those vaccinated are 45 to 60. So there is a huge gap. Let us look at the percentage of population that has been fully vaccinated in the states. The top 5 states that have received the vaccination are Sikkim, Ladakh, Goa, Lakshadweep, Mizoram. These states are very small with a very less density and very less population. Now, the larger states with high density population, the percentage of fully vaccinated population does not even exceed um, like 30%. If you see, like Tamil Nadu, only 25% of the total population fully vaccinated, Meghalaya 24%, Bihar 21%, Jharkhand 19%, Uttar Pradesh. So, although the 100 crore mark of vaccination is an achievement in itself and also speaks of the teamwork that the government has stressed today, especially the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said that this has become possible only because of the teamwork of citizens, scientists, the government, and the companies working together. He said that Jan Bhagidari has been the main reason for the success of the 100 crore mark of vaccination. India now has just achieved a milestone, and this is not the destination. It has still a long way to go. It has to vaccinate the children, especially those below 18 years of age, and the other shortcomings which I have highlighted in the data. However, if this has been achieved, the other half to achieve is not far away, and there is a positive mindset towards achieving the rest. Apart from this, vaccination is not the foolproof against the variant of the virus which is emerging. Now, the most dreadful being the Delta variant as the virus mutates. So, along with vaccination, there is the other norms to be practiced, such as social distancing, mask wearing, which has been stressed by the government. So, this brings me to the end of the top 10 topics of the day, and let me see you tomorrow with another list of top 10 topics of the day. Until then, bye bye and thank you.